Larry's words stung as he stepped into my hospital room with a smirk. "You can't even manage basic household tasks. We should just get a divorce," he said. Beside him stood a woman I didn't recognize. Hooked up to numerous medical devices, I watched them, silently noting how little Larry knew about my true financial worth. $10 million to be precise. His suggestion of divorce seemed almost laughable given the stakes involved for a housewife like me. Resolute in my decision, I realized I couldn't remain with someone who demeaned his spouse during such vulnerable times. Reaching into my bag, I retrieved the divorce papers I had been carrying, prepared for a moment like this. Handing them over with a defiant smile, I watched as Larry accepted them. "I'll be happier with her, so don't worry," Larry declared, draping his arm around the woman, whom he introduced as Brenda. Brenda gave me a condescending look and remarked, "Take care, ma'am, you're not a miss anymore." With those parting words, they left the room, laughter trailing behind them. Their joy seemed transient. Alone, I couldn't help but burst into laughter myself. It was Friday, and by Monday the divorce would be processed. The thought of only 4 more days until freedom made my heart race with anticipation. My name is Natalie Ruth, a 40-year-old housewife living on a farm. While I might not boast any special skills, I take great pride in my extensive cooking abilities. My husband Larry and I share the same age and once walked the halls of the same college. After graduation, we moved from the countryside to Florida, living by ourselves. I often cooked for Larry using fresh vegetables and rice sent by my family. Many believed that my cooking was the way to his heart, and I tended to agree. Larry to this day struggles with any kind of household chore. Ever since our dating days, I've taken care of him, and nothing changed after our marriage. Although we never had children, we found joy in our shared lives, especially our mutual love for food. We enjoyed driving out for short trips on his days off, seeking new culinary delights. When we were newlyweds, Larry was gentle and kind. However, about 2 years into our marriage, he started to change, becoming more controlling. He never became physically aggressive, but his sharp words often stung, and I found myself too weary to argue, doubting he would listen to a full-time housewife like me. Larry initially landed a prestigious job after university, but left it within 5 years. He moved between jobs frequently afterward, which meant our financial situation was always uncertain. This instability and his increasingly harsh demeanor made our relationship more challenging, but I continued to manage our home and hoped for better days ahead. Our financial struggles were a constant in our lives, but Larry seemed to have found some stability at his latest job, where he'd been for the past 3 years. He got along well with his colleagues, and I quietly hoped he might stay there for the long haul. Then, one day, he came home earlier than usual. "I'm home. I quit my job," he announced. Surprised, I blurted out, "What? Again?" This visibly irritated him. I saw his eyebrows twitch. Dropping everything, I rushed over to him. "I'm sorry, I was just shocked. No welcome back?" I tried to backtrack as he retorted sharply, "You've become quite audacious." Larry was clearly in a foul mood, and I feared any wrong word might escalate the tension. "I'm sorry," I said carefully, trying to calm the storm. He grumbled a bit but seemed somewhat placated as he sank into the sofa and turned on the TV. I quietly set a beer and a glass on the table. "Do you want dinner or a bath?" I asked. "Food and alcohol," he replied. To keep the peace, I slipped back into the role of the submissive wife, a role I had been playing for the 10 years of our marriage. After he had eaten and drunk to his satisfaction, Larry fell asleep on the sofa, snoring loudly. The table was a mess, looking as if a child had dined there. I began cleaning up, picking up fallen beer bottles and scraps of food from the floor. As I cleaned, I reflected on my life. This wasn't the marriage I had envisioned. Memories of happier days as a young girl in love surfaced, revealing my buried feelings. I glanced at Larry, fast asleep with no sign of waking soon, and felt a mix of relief and dread. Was continuing this life worth it? Perhaps it was time to consider a divorce. The next day, while Larry started job hunting, I signed divorce papers at the city office. I wasn't ready to file them yet, but having them felt like a form of protection. I discreetly placed the signed papers at the bottom of my frequently used bag, worrying about his reaction if he ever found them. "Where did you wander off to while I was job hunting?" Larry asked when I returned. "I went to the stationery store to buy some resumes." "Look, I thought you might need them," I replied, handing him the resumes. That day, Larry was unusually thoughtful. He questioned me initially, but soon lightened up after receiving the resumes. He mentioned going out for drinks with a friend and left. His new job was with a reputable company, offering a solid salary and better benefits than before. I held a secret hope that maybe this time Larry would stick with his job until retirement, especially since his new department seemed to be in sales. Larry started spending more evenings out, seeking entertainment, which left me with brief periods of solitude that I treasured. I used these moments to recharge, always managing a smile for Larry upon his return. One afternoon, a call from my mother broke the routine. It had been a while since we last spoke, and she was bubbling with excitement over some unexpected news. "We had our mountains and lands appraised, and they're worth $9 million, she explained. "We only need $5 million to enjoy our retirement, so you should consider what this means for you." My mother had always been skeptical of Larry, particularly as he grew more controlling, even preventing me from visiting my childhood home. The news of the windfall was shocking enough, but what truly stunned me was that my mother had transferred the property titles from my grandmother to me to avoid inheritance taxes. Now faced with a crucial decision, I pondered whether to share this with Larry or keep it as my secret leverage toward newfound freedom. A week later, life threw another curveball. I was involved in a traffic accident. Although not life-threatening, the injuries required a week-long hospital stay. After securing my valuables in my hospital room drawer, I reluctantly called Larry to inform him. "I'm sorry, I got injured," I said. His first reaction was self-centered. What about my meals?" he asked. I held back my frustration and explained, "I'll need to be hospitalized for a week. Could you manage your meals until then?" His response lacked any semblance of understanding or empathy. That night, I had planned to discuss the inheritance with him, but his callousness made me reconsider. As I lay in the hospital bed, surrounded by medical equipment, I felt a strong intuition about the upcoming events. Larry's visit to the hospital confirmed my worst fears. His first words were cutting. "You're useless, can't even do housework. Let's get a divorce and you better pay me compensation," he sneered, oblivious to my financial standing. A young woman stood by his side, smirking disdainfully at my plight. With a grim resolve, I decided that I could no longer be with someone who would treat his wife so harshly in her time of need. I retrieved the divorce papers I had kept almost as a talisman from my bag and handed them to him with a forced smile. "Here, I guess it's time we said goodbye," I said. Larry grinned smugly as he took the papers. "I'll be happier with her," he declared, his arm around the young woman he introduced as Brenda. She leaned against him and mockingly said, "Take care, madam." "Oh, you're not a madam anymore. Take care, old lady." As they left the room laughing, I felt a bittersweet relief wash over me. Free from his disdain, I now faced the future with a significant inheritance and a life to rebuild on my terms. As I lay in my hospital bed that Friday, laughter bubbled up inside me. The divorce papers had been served, and by Monday, they would be processed. The weekend passed in a peaceful silence. Larry did not attempt to contact me, which was a welcome respite, yet oddly unsettling for someone accustomed to constant activity. Come Monday evening, however, my phone began to incessantly ring. After about half an hour of persistent calls, I finally decided to pick up. Larry's voice, loud and irate, greeted me immediately. His fury over the divorce papers not being processed as he expected only fueled my laughter, which seemed to infuriate him even more. "I've already filed a notice of non-acceptance," I informed him between chuckles, reminding him of his frequent threats of divorce during our trivial arguments. Larry was clearly agitated, quickly demanding that I withdraw the notice, but I was no longer the woman who jumped at his command. I calmly explained that nothing could be done until I was discharged from the hospital and that we'd need to sort this out at the municipal office. His selfishness was almost comical, and it didn't stop there. Larry blurted out his intentions to register his marriage with Brenda, the woman he had introduced as his new companion. He corrected himself in a panic when I mischievously asked if her name was Kaveen and if she was his mistress. "She's my new wife and technically your mistress since we're not divorced yet," he asserted. I responded to his absurdity with cool composure, frustrating him further. Deciding to strike a more serious chord, I informed him that he would be hearing from my lawyer regarding the division of our assets. I emphasized how I had always managed our household and remained faithful, highlighting his role in our failing marriage. Larry seemed genuinely confused, as if my inability to perform housework from a hospital bed was a betrayal. I explained with patient clarity that my hospitalization did not equate to negligence on my part, and that his failure to support me in these times showed his true character. The conversation ended with Larry flustered and at a loss, a stark contrast to the confident man who had left the hospital room with a smirk just days before. As I recuperated in my hospital bed, the absurdity of Larry's expectations became more apparent. He seemed to think that even as an adult, I was responsible for his well-being, equating my inability to perform house chores due to hospitalization with neglect. His logic was so skewed that it would likely astonish even a judge. Yet, despite his gradual understanding of the situation, he stubbornly clung to his belief that he was justified, especially now that he had Brenda by his side and claimed he no longer needed me. I reminded him sharply that his secret relationship with Brenda constituted cheating, a point he stubbornly refused to accept. Frustrated and seeing no end to his circular arguments, I decisively ended the conversation, instructing him to communicate through our lawyers hereafter. I hung up, ignoring the barrage of calls that followed until he eventually ceased. However, the peace was short-lived. The next morning, my phone started ringing incessantly from 8 a.m. Pressing the call button, I was immediately met with Larry's complaints about being unable to withdraw money from a bank account. He seemed puzzled as to why he couldn't access funds from what he assumed was a joint account. I asked him if he was attempting to withdraw from my personal account, to which he confirmed he was. Larry's anger flared as he failed to grasp the protective measures I had put in place. Before being hospitalized, I had called the bank to temporarily prevent any withdrawals, anticipating that Larry might recklessly tap into my savings while I was incapacitated. This precaution proved wise. Larry demanded that I authorize a withdrawal immediately, failing to see the impropriety of trying to take money from an account belonging to someone he was divorcing. I calmly explained that we were effectively strangers now, and I had no obligations to finance strangers. This newfound assertiveness shocked him. He was unaccustomed to me standing my ground. He insisted that I send him money and even suggested I owed him compensation for not performing household duties. It seemed that despite his education, Larry lacked basic common sense after 12 years of marriage. Treating him with the patience one might use with a child, I reiterated that any financial settlements would be handled through our lawyers. Larry's frustration boiled over, and he threatened to visit me in the hospital immediately. Unfazed by his threats, I remained calm, prepared to face him, if necessary, confident in my decision to stand up for myself and move on from the manipulative dynamics of our marriage. After my conversation with Larry, I had preemptively informed the nursing staff at the hospital to only allow visits from my parents, ensuring that Larry couldn't just barge into my room. Despite this, He attempted to visit but was stopped at the nurse's station, leading him to switch tactics by flooding my phone with calls and messages. I saved these messages as evidence and got in touch with my lawyer, who promptly dealt with the situation, causing the incessant notifications to cease. Just as I was beginning to relax, thinking the drama was subsiding, an unexpected twist emerged. I was informed that Denise, a longtime friend with whom I had lost touch after marriage, was visiting. Denise and I had a history of shared dining adventures sparked by our mutual love for food, which we frequently discussed on social media. She came by, expressing concern over my accident, and brought startling news about Brenda, the young woman with Larry. Denise revealed that Brenda was actually her niece and confessed that she had overheard her planning to marry a 40-year-old man. When Denise saw a photo of the supposed fiancé, she recognized him as my husband, Larry. Shocked by the coincidence and the deceit, Denise shared that she had already informed her sister about the situation and was contemplating demanding compensation from Brenda for the distress caused. Assuring me of her support, Denise expressed her desire to maintain our friendship, undeterred by the familial connection to my ongoing marital strife. She had arranged a meeting to address these issues directly with her sister and Brenda. Filled with gratitude for Denise's unwavering support and bolstered by our friendship of over 15 years, I left the hospital the next day and headed to a private dining room in a restaurant where a meeting had been set up. To my astonishment, I found Larry and Brenda already there, nonchalantly enjoying an expensive traditional meal. Larry, ever audacious, had the gall to remind me to bring money to pay for their meal. Firm in my resolve, I refused, instructing them to settle their bill as I was there, not to subsidize their lunch, but to assert my rights to the assets. Ignoring Larry's rude remarks, my lawyer and I took our seats at the table. We laid out the evidence clearly. Legal documents and statements delineating Larry's faults and outlining the terms for the division of property. The papers made it clear that the responsibility for the dissolution of our marriage rested squarely on his shoulders, and I was prepared to defend my interests rigorously. After my hospitalization, a critical meeting took place in a private dining room of a local restaurant involving myself, Larry, Brenda, my lawyer, and unexpectedly, my long-lost friend Denise. As Larry and Brenda enjoyed their meal, unaware of the confrontation that awaited, my lawyer and I presented a series of damning photographs. These photos, taken by Denise, captured Larry and Brenda together, and even more shockingly, Brenda entering a hotel with another man. The surprise and guilt on their faces were palpable as they halted their meal. Denise chose that exact moment to make her entrance, confirming her role in capturing the images. Brenda was visibly bewildered to see her aunt involved. Denise, maintaining her loyalty to me, expressed her deep disappointment in Brenda's actions, but affirmed her desire to remain friends with me, despite seeking compensation from her niece. In the heat of the confrontation, Brenda blurted out that she was pregnant, a claim that visibly shocked Larry. However, the claim quickly unraveled when Denise, skeptical, noted that Brenda showed no signs of pregnancy. Under pressure, Brenda admitted to fabricating the pregnancy story as a tactic to secure Larry's commitment, confessing her strategy of targeting affluent older men. Larry, finding himself in a web of lies and deceit, was left speechless. Denise, taking charge of the situation, led a remorseful Brenda away, promising a more formal apology later. Left alone with me, Larry scrambled to salvage our relationship, pleading for a fresh start and lamenting his deception of Brenda. He even tried to leverage my lack of recent work experience to suggest I couldn't manage alone. I firmly rejected his advances, revealing my substantial personal net worth, estimated at around $10 million, acquired through inheritance, funds he had no claim over as they were not marital assets. With my financial independence assured, I reiterated my intention to proceed with the divorce. The fallout from this revelation was swift. Brenda, under pressure from her family, transferred a sum of money into my account as a form of compensation, and her mother ensured she worked to make amends. Larry, now estranged from his own family and Brenda's, faced severe repercussions. He was dismissed from his job for his indiscretions and resorted to multiple construction jobs to manage his debts. With the divorce finalized, I redirected the funds I received to charity and relocated to the countryside to start anew. Meanwhile, Denise and I rekindled our friendship, making plans to remain single, live together, and indulge in our shared passion for food and travel. We look forward to beginning our new life, embarking on culinary tours, and taking short trips, celebrating our freedom and the enduring strength of our friendship. Excitement fills me as I prepare for a future where I can live joyfully and authentically, true to myself.